one day my mom called my dad and said, like, I think that she's using drugs and you need to come down here and like, we need to talk. And like, they had not been in a room together since I was like 4. We get to the room together and I tell them like, I'm using pills because nobody wants to say the word heroin. Yeah. I never use that word. If somebody used that word, I'm like, you're a cop. For sure. But I'm like, yeah, it's pills. It's pills. My dad was like, well, do you want to go to rehab? Well, meanwhile, like I'd been looking up rehab. But the thing about the drugs is that, like I said, you're a slave to it. So I would be in the middle of getting high talking about how much I hated that drug, but I couldn't stop. And I had this weird thought in my head that if I didn't try to stop, then I didn't know that I couldn't. Because my fear was I would try to stop getting high, and then I couldn't stay sober, and then this was just going to be the rest of my life.
I think it's true that you never really know what somebody's capable of, for better or worse. I think that when people think of addiction, they think of it as something that can't happen to them because it happens to other people. It happens to bad people. And I think that too often we look at somebody's circumstances or decisions they've made and we don't ask the question of why they ended up there or how they ended up there. So this conversation is exactly that. Bailey Joe is a massage therapist, a power lifter, and also happens to be a recovering heroin addict. It was wild to listen to her story about how she ended up going down that path and how she found the strength, both literally and figuratively, to get herself out of it. She's been clean for 5.5 years at this point, which is amazing because before that, she was living in a cycle of kind of what you'd imagine with abusive relationships and theft and dealing drugs just to maintain her lifestyle, for lack of a better term, until she decided that that wasn't going to be her life anymore. But if you liked it, help us out by subscribing to the channel and tell anybody that you know that you think might find it interesting, because that would really help us out. And also this episode is brought to you by the Phipps Team and 509realestate.com. If you or anybody you know is looking to, have a little conversation about buying a house in this here day and age. So, but right now, here's Bailey Joe Still. We need to move the studio.
We do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about maybe an actual spot downtown. Like downtown.
That'd be cool. I enjoy having this so close to my house.
That is nice.
But I feel like if we just covered up that window, but then the problem is we lose the window. Like if we just covered it with like even like a mattress or something just like nailed on there.
Seriously.
But then it's always dark in here.
You think it would help?
Yeah, I think the majority of that sound is coming through the window, okay. I think.
Yeah. If I came in and there was a mattress nailed to the window, I would have immediately left.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, we get crazy in here sometimes, It's what happens.
Not a safe place.
You gotta have a mattress on the side, No.
So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
So what was life like for you growing up?
So my parents got divorced when I was 4, and they both remarried when I was 5. I lived with my mom at the time, and I didn't know it then, but now that I'm older and look back, I grew up in a really abusive household. I later learned, like, my mom's, like, diagnosed sociopath. She grew up in a really abusive home, and that just trickled on down. But it was this weird environment of nobody got along. There's always issues. But as far as the outside world was concerned, we were perfect. Everything was kind of like that cult mentality. Nobody can know that there's issues. We're the perfect family, all of that.
Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Instagram before Instagram.
Right.
And so even now, people think that the family is so great and like, I'm the one that's not good.
Right.
But my mom wanted like me to be her best friend. So I was her best friend for some of the time until her real friends came around. And then I got in the way and I was a nuisance. And I got hit a lot. And I thought everybody's parents beat them and you just like knew not to tell, and it was a time where parents were hitting their kids like a lot more than they do now.
Right.
But that was happening. And my mom was telling me that my dad didn't really love me. He didn't want me around because they'd both gotten remarried. My dad then had other children and my mom didn't. So she said, your dad didn't love you. He doesn't want you around. He only wants you there to be a babysitter. He has a new family now. Like you don't belong in there, all of this stuff. Well, I didn't really know my dad very well. I'm a kid. So that became my reality. I would see him one night a week for a few hours and didn't give him a chance at all.
How old are you?
That time I was probably 7. So I was going there every other weekend, and my stepmom didn't really like me. And I kind of got in the way. I wasn't that picture perfect, their family kind of thing. And It's things that my dad and I have talked about now, but he definitely like chose her over me. And I know that my mom made it difficult. When I was supposed to go to my dad's, she would take me somewhere else and call him and be like, yeah, we're not going to meet up. And then when she did that, she would tell me, your dad doesn't want to see you. You're not going to your dad's house. He doesn't love you, blah, blah, blah. So I grew up in this house where there was just a lot of turmoil and a lot of physical violence, and like my mom and stepdad hitting each other and them hitting me and trying to call the cops and all of these things. And I just thought that was normal. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of the physical abuse, I grew up being told that I was fat, that I need to eat less, was ugly. I remember reading a journal that I had written when I was younger and saying, I don't think my stepdad knows my actual name. He only calls me dumbass or dumb shit. And so I hated myself. I hated my life. But as far as outside world was concerned, I was the happiest kid because I would have the shit beat out of me in the car and step out and be like, hi, I'm Bailey. Nice to meet you. Like so happy. Never learned to process any of these emotions.
Just suppress them?
To completely suppress them. At 15, I started cutting myself, and I make jokes now like typical white girl shit, but I started cutting myself because I wanted to feel something. And it was, I don't know if it was so much like I wanted to feel things or if it was you hurt me, but I can hurt myself worse type of deal. But also at 15, kind of the catalyst of my life completely changing and kind of turning into something even weirder. My mom got real drunk one night when I was 15 and wanted me to drive home from my aunt's house. And I was 15 and I shouldn't have done that. And I told her no. I said, well, let's just stay here. It's a Friday night. Let's stay at my aunt's house. And she got really pissed and decided that she was going to drive. And we started driving and I told her that she was putting my life in danger. And she started just beating the shit out of me and telling me how stupid I was and that nobody loved me, and started saying like crazy stuff about how I would never see my dad or my siblings again. And she was going to keep me in the house until I was 18 and make sure my life was miserable and nobody was ever going to see me. Like, weird stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, who cares if my dad doesn't love me? If he doesn't actually love me, like, it's got to be better than this. And my dad before that had asked me a lot of times, does your mom hit you? I'm like, no, she's never hit me, because I thought, you don't tell anybody, and I could not trust him. I didn't know him. And finally, my mom pulled over on the side of the freeway, and I thought that, like, she was going to get out and let me drive, but instead she, like, grabbed my head and slammed it in the center console and into the window. And I just was like, I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die if I stay here. Like, this woman is going to fucking kill me. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, my aunt had called her because we should have been home by now, but she was swerving and drunk and driving all over the road. And my mom told her, yeah, Bailey was being really mouthy and awful to me, so I smacked her in the mouth once. Like, just this weird, like, she knew what she was doing and spun it even then, So we continue driving, and we get back to the house. And she had taken my phone when we pulled over, made me give her my phone. And I got out of the car, or the pickup, before she did. And I went inside, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning at this time. And my stepdad's phone was sitting on the counter, and I grabbed it, and I shoved it in my pants. And then she came in, and she made me hug her and tell her how much I love her, and she's the only one that cares about me, and, like, nobody loves her but me, and, like, all this weird stuff. And then I went to my room, and she then woke my stepdad up, and they started fighting. And while they started fighting, I took his phone and I texted my aunt, and I said, that's not actually what happened. And I also texted my dad, and I said, this is what just happened tonight. Like, I can't do this. And by some miracle, I call it a God thing, he woke up to that text at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I packed my bag and I ran down the hill, because we lived on a hill, and I hid in a field until my dad got there, and he picked me up, and I put my stepdad's phone in the mailbox, and we went back to my dad's house. And that started this whole time of trying to get a restraining order against my mom, of me going to New Hope Domestic Violence and filling out everything that had happened in my life and everything my mom had ever hit me with. And, like, I just remember it being like front and back, page and a half of just hit me with this, hit me with that, hit me here, did this to me. And I remember seeing my dad cry for the first time, because he thought maybe, like, she might be doing something, because turns out, like, she used to hit him too. Mm-hmm. He's got a scar on his head from her.
Right.
But I had denied it, right? So we were going through all of this, and I started going to court-ordered therapy and dealing with some of this mental health stuff.
So you were 15
Yes.
when you officially moved out? Then.
Yes, okay. 15. But it wasn't so much like that the abuse like really affected me. I mean, obviously it did, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that like my whole life had been a lie. That this reality was created for me, that my mom had kept me away from anybody that would tell me that that's not really how life is. And that I could have had something different the whole time if I had just been honest, right? Mm-hmm. Because I thought everybody dealt with what I dealt with, that that's what life was. And realizing I spent 15 years hating myself and hating my life and getting beat on, and that I hadn't had to. It like completely, especially at 15, you know, and your brain is still figuring stuff out, it flipped my world upside down. And I remember just sitting in class for like 2 weeks straight and I just sat there and I was just gone. And I started trying to fucking rebuild my life with my dad and my stepmom, but I didn't know them. Mm-hmm. I didn't trust them. And I was very suicidal, still cutting myself, wanting to kill myself. But I didn't realize I wasn't okay, which sounds insane now, like when you just say it out loud, because like if you want to kill yourself, like you're not probably great. But my dad was like, hey, like let's sit down, let's talk. How are you doing? I'm like, I'm awesome. I'm doing so good. Like I love it here. It's the best. And I had a plan to kill myself that night. That was that kind of those thoughts that I just didn't realize any of these things. But I was pretty messed up mentally. I went to a doctor. I got on an insanely high dose of antidepressants. I look back now, I'm like, that doctor should not have done that. Mm-hmm. And I started going to that court therapy and trying to figure things out. But my dad and my stepmom already had their own life. And I have a brother and sister that are 7 and 9 years younger than me. And so they go from these kids, they have taken care of these little kids, to there's this 15-year-old in their house who's messed up. And they didn't know how to handle any of that. And they had their own issues, and they ended up getting divorced too. I give my dad a hard time that he's really bad at marriage. But they were having their issues. And they didn't have space or know how to handle a fucked up 15-year-old at all. So when I was 16, just this battle of trying to figure out dynamics, and it just didn't work, and I didn't feel loved or wanted. I felt like a nuisance. My stepmom, I completely lied about where I went, and I went to Wenatchee and went and hung out with friends one night, and she found out about it and asked me about it, and I lied, and I was like, no, I was here all weekend. And then I admitted it, and she told me to find a new place to live. And so I was like, you would never say that to the other two because they're your actual kids. Like, I don't want to be here anyway. I'll go. So I went to pack up my stuff, and then they told me not to leave. By then, very defiant, strong-willed 16-year-old, I'm like, I'm going. Right. So they called the cops on me and reported me as a runaway. So I got brought back. And the next morning, I went to school early. I took a different bus route, like because they took my car, all of that. And they thought that I had left again. So they called the cops again. I got reported as a runaway again. And I was like, I'm at school. Like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm not a runaway. And my dad said, if it happens one more time, like, you're going to go to juvie. And I was like, well, you're going to call it one more time because, like, I'm not coming back. So we, like, ended up sitting down and having this conversation about if I left, I wasn't welcome back unless I came with hat in hand. I remember that saying, hat in hand. Hat in hand. Yeah. And I was like,
what does that even mean?
Like begging for forgiveness. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, I don't know what the fuck that means. Like, bye, I'm going.
I don't have any hats.
Yeah. No, I'm like, I'm not kind of like begging you. I'm like, you guys hate each other already. You know, this is stupid. I don't want to be here. And so I left. And at first I was just kind of bouncing couch to couch from friends because I'm 16 years old and I'm still in school. And I was a smart kid. I was an AP student. They wanted me to skip grades when I was younger. I probably ruined my brain now, but then very smart. And so I continued to go to school, and it's almost summertime, and I'm taking my final and studying for my final at work, like with no real place to live. And I'm like, I'm going to do this thing.
Were you junior in high school at this time?
Okay. And so I finished out high school, and I turned 17, and I spent that summer, I worked at Domino's, and I was just doing whatever I wanted and going to lots of parties, and I started drinking. Okay. And I had tried smoking weed one time when I was 15, and I was at play practice because I used to do a lot of drama stuff, and I'm like, this is stupid, and it hurts my throat, and I hate it. But that summer, I started drinking and realized, like, wow, I really like this. Like, it made me feel good. Mm-hmm. It made all of that stress and those things disappear. And then I started smoking weed and really liked smoking weed, and it's the dumbest thing now, but we called it getting crossfaded when you smoke weed and drink, and we thought we were really cool.
Dank, bro.
I know.
Dank.
I'm like, that's not a real thing, but like, okay, you're just loaded. It's, all right. But it was a bunch of kids that were partying with, now that I look back and see it, it was like they all had shit parents and stuff too, and half of their parents were addicts. And so we had the party house that we would go to, and we would drink and party and have fun. And I drank less and then smoked weed more because I was the designated driver that we would go on adventures. And like, you can smoke weed and drive, obviously, but like, I'm not going to drink and drive because I'm very responsible.
That was the line for designated drivers. Drink and smoke, just less.
Yeah. Also, I've driven. I mean, this is terrible. I've driven on acid because everybody else was drinking, and I was like, "You're not going to drive because you're drunk. I'm only on acid, so we're good."
Well, wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's get
What
is it like?
What is driving on acid like?
It's stupid.
Okay.
I remember they wanted to go to McDonald's, and we went to McDonald's, and I'm like, it's starting to peak, and I'm in my head. I remember this clearly. It was in my head that if a police officer pulled me over and did a sobriety test, how I would tell the alphabet backwards. So then I got stuck on a loop in my head of saying the alphabet backwards, and I'm just driving going Z, Y, X, W,
Right.
P. Yeah.
Yeah. So the officer comes to the window. You just start saying that like, on your way, ma'am.
And we got to the house. We were fine. We were safe. All of that.
Yeah.
But that's my best thinking when I get loaded, right? Not the AP student anymore. But I start drinking a lot more, and I'm like, I want to try all these drugs. I want to just experience life. Like, I'm free 17-year-old living out on my own and doing all the things that I do. I'm going to try this stuff.
Like a wine tasting.
Yeah, exactly. But like with acid and heroin and stuff. But I did acid and I loved it. And I continued to drink and do ecstasy and all of these party things, right? But then in my thinking, I was like, man, I come from a family of alcoholics. Like, on both sides, they've got issues with alcoholism. So I need to really cut back on my drinking because I don't want to become an alcoholic. And in that same like few months span, so when I cut back on my drinking, I then like continued to do a lot more drugs because I thought I was too smart to become a drug addict.
What was your drug of choice during that time?
During that time, probably acid and weed.
Okay.
And because it was like that summertime of just like party drugs, right? Which acid's not really a party drug, but it was for us.
It's a summer drug.
It's a summer drug. It really is. And then you go back to work at Domino's the next day feeling like shit.
Yeah.
So I cut back on the drinking because I had it in my head of like, I don't want to be like them. Well, then I'm still on this insane high dose of antidepressants from everything, right? And I went to go fill my prescription, and they told me I didn't have insurance. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it was going to be like a couple $100, whatever. And I was like, well, I don't need it then. I found out later that my stepmom it was illegal, but illegally took me off my dad's insurance. And so I couldn't get my meds. But I didn't know that then. And I was like, man, like, I'll be okay. I'll just, wait until I can get my prescription. And actually, I tried heroin at this point. That's right. So I had tried, we're partying with all these people. And thing with people talk about weed being a gateway drug. I don't think in and of itself it's a gateway drug. But if you're with a bunch of people that are smoking weed, at least one of them is doing coke. And if you know that person that's doing coke, you start hanging out around those people, at least one of them is doing something harder. And that's how it kind of spirals into trying all of these things. And I was like, I'm just, again.
So do you remember your very first time doing heroin?
I do.
What was that like?
I didn't really like it that much. It made me sleepy and tired, and I wasn't super into it. I'm like, okay.
Did you snort it, smoke it? How'd you do it?
Smoked it.
Okay.
I remember it looked like a booger. I was like, ew. And you smoked it on a foil, and I took a couple hits of it with all these people, and I was just not really into it. It just made me super, super chill, relaxed, calm, and I'm like, I'm trying to party. Like, this isn't for me. Right. But I had tried heroin. I was hanging around a bunch of people who then as I realized as things go on that they're selling heroin and all of that. So I couldn't get my prescription. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I'll be okay. And then I started going through withdrawals from the antidepressant, and I started having brain zaps, and it threw me for a loop. Like, I felt like shit, and it felt like my brain the things weren't connecting. When they did, it just felt like my brain was getting shocked. And so I went over to a friend's house, and I smoked heroin again with them, and a couple hits made all of that go away.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, I can just do this so I can get my meds again. I'll just smoke this, like, a couple hits. I feel fine. It makes me relax. This will work in place of those antidepressants. And the thing about heroin is that in any drug in general, your tolerance goes up and you need more each time. So at first I would smoke 2 hits and I would be great for the whole day. And then you need to smoke a little bit more and then you need to buy a bag. And I would throw in with other people like, oh, we're just going to go get a bag. And the other thing is that when you're like on the street, you don't say, we're going to go get a bag of heroin. You say H or brown or down or all the slang words, right? So it's not like you're talking about doing heroin, because if you say like, oh, a heroin addict, like that's scary. Those are scary words. But like, oh yeah, we just smoke a little H.
Yeah, make it playful.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
You
That
know,
makes sense.
talking about like, oh yeah, get some brown sugar or whatever. These dumb little things that in my head, I'm like, yeah, this is fine. I will just continue to do this. And so I continue to use and get high every day. And at the point, I'm not even realizing I'm like getting high. I'm just feeling better, right? And when I smoked it, all of those feelings of like hating myself and not being good enough and the anxiety and the depression and wanting to die, they all went away for a little bit. And I felt good and I was happy, quote unquote happy. And so I started using it every day. And in the meantime, I go through my senior year. And because I'm living on my own, I had like 48 absences in one class and 52 in another.
So full-blown heroin addict senior year.
Senior year, but not realizing it, right? I'm getting high every day, don't realize I'm addicted. I'm just around people that do it all the time, so it's normal. And that's the other thing is that I moved out on my own at 16, and then I turned 17, and when you are a kid, you can't get an apartment, you can't get a place. So I'm couch surfing with people that are 21, people that are 23, and people that let a 17-year-old sleep on their couch when you're 21 or 23 aren't usually like successful 21 and 23-year-olds, right? Like they're partying, they're doing their stuff. So I start hanging out with all these people that are older than me and feeling a part of, and they're all doing this drug. So obviously I'm also going to do this drug. So I like go through my senior year. I barely go to school, but I'm smart. So I show up, I learn a little bit, take the test, ace the test, do 0 homework, and never show up. And it all averages out to like a C-. And that's how I graduate.
Okay.
And then one day comes around, probably after a year of using every day, a day comes around where nobody had anything in town. Somebody had gotten raided, so everybody was scared. Nobody wanted to like sell anything, so everybody was just like real down low. Nobody had drugs. And I started feeling really sick. And I thought, I was like, oh, I think I'm getting the flu. And then I looked around at people around me that I normally would get high with, and they were sick too. And I went, oh, fuck. I'm like, this is withdrawals. Like, this sucks. This is not fun. Like, how am I going to get past this? And it sucked, and it felt like shit, and it felt like I was getting really sick. And then somebody came through, and they had drugs. And I smoked a couple hits, and that went away. I'm like, oh, like, this is easy. You know, like, I just smoke a couple hits, and I'm fine. And then, like, something that, like, when I think about it more and more, too, of the lifestyle, and I've worked steps and gone to a lot of therapy and things now, I was addicted to the lifestyle. I was addicted to feeling a part of. I was trusted. I was a 17-year-old. I was saying this before we started the podcast. I had a car, and I had a license, and I had insurance, and I was the one that could drive people around. And because of that, I was hanging out with, you know, fucking 30-year-olds selling ounces of heroin and meth and rolling around with guns and shit. And I'm like, wow, they trust me. I'm the one that gets to drive them around and be a part of and get high for free because I'm so trustworthy. And I'm not like, and this is terrible, but I'm not like these other junkies that will steal from them or snitch on them. Like, I'm a part of. And I think that that was something that I was looking for. Not only am I like getting high and feeling great because it's that high of things, I am a part of something and people want me around.
Community.
Yeah.
It replaced your family.
100%.
Yeah.
And I had kind of started talking to my mom again at this point, but I wasn't allowed to see my brother and sister, wasn't talking to my dad at all. And so I had all of these things like hanging over me, but I made it all go away. Like, I just hung out with all of these people. And the biggest thing with addiction is if you're hanging around people that are also doing it, like, you're not questioning your actions because everybody around you is also doing it.
So what point were you like, oh, this shit's getting real now? Like, this is getting scary?
Probably a few years into it. So because I was so oblivious, like, ego plays a big part in my story. I thought I was better than everyone, smarter than you. I'm not shooting up, so I'm not like those fucking junkies. I am better than everyone because I'm driving them around and I'm trusted and I'm better and, you know, I'm not addicted like you are and I could go without. I just don't want to go without. Like really, really played like I was better than everyone, which is hilarious to me because I had zero self-esteem, fucking hated myself, still thought I was better than you. So a couple years into using, living this lifestyle, I start selling drugs too because like that's the succession of things. If you can't afford to get high anymore all the time, then you just start selling it. And I was around all these people that trusted me. And I look back now, I'm like fucking predators because they're like 30-year-old men. And so I started selling drugs for them. And then I met this guy, and there was like, I lived in a small town. I'm from Moses Lake. There's like two sides of the drug dealing operation. And I don't know how to say this correctly, but like there's the white people and then there was Hispanics, like where they got their heroin from was different things. And I met this Hispanic dude and he was selling drugs for the other side of people. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in love with you. You know what would be like soulmates is if we just combine efforts and sell more drugs together, like, cause that's what love is based on. So that's what I did. I fucking went to this guy's house and then I just like didn't leave. And it wasn't even his house, his mom's house where he lived in the basement.
Love at first sight.
I know, it was love at first sight, you know? And I was like, obviously, like, this is the next step in life. Like, I love you. And it was an abusive relationship. But it wasn't as abusive as the household I grew up in. So it wasn't scary to me. You know, he would like block me from leaving and grab me and shake me and all of these things. But like, he didn't outright punch me in the face. So obviously, like, he's a really good guy. And I dated this guy for like 2.5 years and just kept selling drugs together, kept doing all of these things. And I look back now especially, and I remember like having horrible nightmares about him and trying to get away from all of it. And then I'd wake up and be like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Like, I don't think this is right. But I was so caught up in the addiction of things that I could not stop. And you ask, like, when did it get serious? When we started dating. When I woke up and immediately had to get high. Immediately, because if I didn't, I would feel like I was dying. And the thing about heroin withdrawals, most of the time you're probably not going to die from them, but you're going to want to. It's disgusting, but like when you start, your body starts withdrawing, heroin like stops everything up. So you like don't poop when you're on heroin. So like I have a squatty potty now and I like really love it.
Bidet? Do you have a bidet?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to set it up in our new house.
Hold
But
on,
I was like...
Yeah, I got a bidet.
You got a bidet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm derailing this.
Yes.
Explain.
Because we found my drug. Bidets are...
The butt squirter?
It is a life-changing appliance.
Love it.
Yeah.
So do you like attach it to your toilet or do you
there
actually
are
have
a bunch
bidet?
of different ways you can do it.
What do you have?
I have one that like attaches to the bowl. And then another one that is a bidet, but it's also like I have a 11-month-old. So for like a reusable diaper, it's like just like a sprayer in your kitchen kind of thing. But it's angry. Yeah, yeah. That one's angry. But no, it's this is I'm dead serious. We're talking about like turning our lives around.
Yes.
It is a game changer.
Okay.
You will not. You'll realize how unclean everyone around you who doesn't have one is. You start wondering why everybody thinks it's weird to have one. I remember when I was trying to buy one, I went to everywhere I went, like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. Everyone I asked, they were like, well, why would you want that? I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Like if it was anywhere else on your body,
No, absolutely.
you wouldn't use paper to wipe it off, would you?
No, my husband, I'm just giving his shit now. When he's at work, he absolutely like takes wet wipes with him because
Yes.
he's like, I cannot. Ew, no.
Yeah.
Well, the first bidet I ever tried was on our honeymoon, and I was like Snapchatting people from on there. I'm like, this is amazing.
That'd be me too.
Yeah,
That'd be me.
Loved it.
So
I'd be the guy doing one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Last thought before we get back into actual life, it would be an interesting giveaway for the team. Is with every house you sell, you get like a Tushy bidet, like a real one, like a $300 one.
I would totally do that.
Yeah, it would be a super unique market. I've thought about it for closing gifts, but as something we could market
Next year, let's do it.
I think you need to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It would be something different. People would notice that they were doing it. It would maybe start a conversation, maybe offend some people. I don't know.
We can make the coolest marketing piece behind that.
When I got a squatty potty, I went to my dad's house. He didn't have one. I'm like, you want me to poop like a peasant? Like, so I sent them a squatty potty.
Yeah.
So when you're on heroin,
Here we are.
when you're on heroin, it stops everything up. So you're like not pooping. And I'm like weirdly okay with talking about pooping now, for like 2 weeks, which is terrible for you. And you don't have any you're not sneezing ever, and your nose doesn't run. And it's part of probably why they gave it to children back in the day for like colds, because it just kind of stops all of that stuff. So when you don't have it, all of a sudden you're sneezing nonstop. Everything's draining out of everything in your body. So you're like shitting yourself and body sweats, and you can't sleep because your legs, you start getting these restless legs and restless arms, and you can't hold them still. And they just want jerk out. It's super, super weird. But it's awful. And in your head that as soon as you fucking get high, all of that stops. It goes away. So when I started dating him, I'm realizing I'm having to get high all the time. And the other thing, even before this, that I look at now, I'm like, I was just such a slave to a substance. So I would wake up every day, and I was just thinking about getting high. And it didn't matter if I had some in my pocket. It was always on my mind. I wouldn't be able to just sit here and have a conversation. I would be thinking about, I need to go to the bathroom real quick and hit it a few times, or, I got to sell this bag to this person, or I need to go pick up now, or what do I have enough to get me through the night? What am I going to all of these things, always on your mind. Mm-hmm. So that's when I realized it got serious, is I had to get high multiple times a day. I was using an insane amount, because we were combined forces, like soulmates do. And we're selling a lot of drugs, and the more that you sell, the more that you get to use. And so I was probably doing $250, $300 worth of drugs a day, on my own, not with him as well. He had his own stuff. And then as things go in life and all of these things, your person that you go and pick up from doesn't sell anymore. They get wrapped up, they go to prison, they go to jail, whatever, or, get robbed, all of these things that happen out there. And then you're not selling drugs anymore. And you still have that insane addiction, but you now have to pay for it out of pocket. And that's when I started, I'd been lying this whole time, right? I was a really good liar. Grew up lying to everyone, so I had already practiced it my whole life. That's when I started to become a huge thief. If people brought their bags in and their bag was sitting over there, and get them to not pay attention and they had cash in their bag, it was mine. I figured if you didn't want me to steal your cash, you would carry a card. That was my thought process, is that the world owed me and I was going to get it. And if anything, I would just steal and completely lie about it.
So, would it just be from friends, or did you take it a step further, or how far did you go to try to get
family was the biggest one. And in my head, I rationalized my behavior of stealing from my mom or stealing from my grandma. My mom had taken money from me when I was younger and lots of different things and situations, and my mom had beaten me, and she owed me.
Retribution.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Didn't feel the least bit bad. The worst thing that I did, that I didn't want to tell anybody for a really long time, was my great-grandma. I grew up around my great-grandma a lot. She was the only one that didn't hurt me. She wasn't, I look back and she still wasn't that great. She was kind of mean, but I loved her, and she was the one person that had not abused me. And she went to the old folks home, and I went to visit her one time and asked her if she had money. And she's like, well, you could write yourself a check. Mm. And she had macular degeneration, and she legally blind. And I was like, okay. So I wrote myself a check, and she had me sign it. And I was like, there's that. So over the next, month or 2 months, I probably wrote myself $1,500 worth of money from her, from this lady that's living in a fucking old folks home and is legally blind. And loved me, and I would go over and spend time with her, and that spending time with her was just used for me to get her checkbook and steal money out of her thing.
I remember one time when I was probably 5, I went into my grandma's purse and I took $200 or something like that. What's a 5-year-old going to do with $200? But I just did it. Mm-hmm. And I still think about that. And I was a baby. And I still think about that. And I'm like, oh, why'd you do that? It's one of those scream at yourself in your car moments.
Absolutely.
So having done something like that when I was older, that's a hard thing for me to wrap my head around.
Absolutely. So and that's the thing, is that I love this woman. more than anything. This was one person who had actually been like a mom figure to me, and had never made me feel shitty about myself. And I loved her, and I did want to spend time with her, but I wanted to get high a lot more.
Yeah.
And when it's this person that stands in the way between you and getting that thing that will make you feel better and feel okay, especially when you're withdrawing, all of that stuff goes out the window. The morals are gone. The knowing what you should and shouldn't do are gone. You're then army crawling on the ground to go fucking get in that purse and get that checkbook and write yourself a check and be like, oh, it's great to see you, to then leave and go fucking cash a check somewhere so that you can go get a bag.
Any shoplifting or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I only have 2 theft charges, which I think is hilarious. I give my husband a really hard time about how he went to prison because he wasn't that good at it. But my first one was at Walmart with popcorn chicken. I had stolen like a lot more other stuff, but like popcorn chicken, I was real hardcore. But yes, Walmart shops, we would go in with a receipt from somebody's mom that they had stuff they'd actually gotten, and then we'd go steal that stuff and then return it. Yeah.
Always think about that. I always think about that, about like Costco.
Yeah.
Or, well, no, because they mark the receipt or whatever, but like if everybody throws their receipt away.
Yeah.
That would be all you'd have to do.
We would go and, if nobody's mom had something, or their family, whatever, go search parking lots.
Yeah.
And then you go in, and the second time that I got charged, I went in and we didn't even leave the store with the stuff. We were so sick, me and my boyfriend at the time were so sick, like withdrawing, that we went in to the store, stole the stuff, didn't even take it outside, just from the store, then took it to the like customer service desk to return it for money. And like, I thought I wasn't going to get caught. Right. But that's where your brain's at, right? Yeah. You just none of this matters. Like, repercussions don't matter. I'm not going to get caught. I don't care about my family. I don't care about my friends. I need to do whatever it takes to get loaded. And so that's where I was at with things. And I was a liar and I was a thief. And I wasn't hanging out with any of my old friends that didn't use, because if you were texting me and it wasn't about like buying drugs from me or selling drugs to me, I wasn't going to reply to you. It was a fucking waste of my time. And so all of these friendships go to the side, because if you're not getting high, like, I'm not going to be around you, and I'm not telling people that I'm getting high. So
seems like a lonely place.
Absolutely. And then at this time, this boyfriend and I move from his mom's basement to a motel, and it's called the Lakeside Motel in Moses Lake, and it's just this dump. And I thought, this is normal. I called it my 1 bedroom. Like, this shit-ass motel with there's not even a kitchenette in it. It's a tiny little shitty motel room, and that's where we lived.
What do you need a kitchen for? You're stocking up on popcorn chicken.
Exactly that. And so many little ice creams from Safeway, like, because those things were really easy to steal. Yeah. And I wasn't going to spend money on food. And so, like, I always laugh now. I'm like, because now I'm like a power lifter and stuff and in decent shape. I was fatter in active addiction than I was in sobriety. Most people get all sucked up, but I was just getting high, sleeping all the time, and eating ice cream and popcorn chicken. And that's all I did with my life. But so I go through all of these things. And in the midst of this, and I've been a massage therapist long enough, I don't care about talking about it, but I went to massage school on drugs. High on heroin, went in, and half of the time showed up to that too. But I ended up getting my like massage license and passing the test, and started massaging for people like while I was full-blown heroin addict, and like working for myself. And
how long that going for?
2 years. That was before I like went to rehab and left. So I'm doing that, and I'm selling drugs on the side, and all, because there's the times where I'm selling and then nobody has anything, and I'm the one that's buying it and trying to steal money and all that. And then there's a come up, and then I'm selling again and whatever. And you make new friends that that sell for somebody else, and those connections and things, or you rob somebody or they rob you, and it's just this constant influx. But I'd cut everybody else out of my life. Like you said, lonely place, living in this motel. Like, I remember withdrawing at like 2:00 in the morning, just waiting for that text, like that somebody would come up and that you could come by, and, like showing up to people's houses in the middle of the night to get something, and getting fronts and all of these things, whatever it took to get loaded. And so I'm just living like this, and I look like shit. My face is really sensitive anyway, like my skin. But when you're on drugs and like massive toxins are in your body, you start picking at your face and start like, you're super high and just like picking constantly. So my face was just completely covered and all of these, like, not sores, but like, if it, when you poke out a zit for like a really long time and it just continues to get worse and you can't leave it alone, she's like, oh my gosh, go away. It was that, but it was all over my face. I'm like, oh, my skin's so sensitive. All of these things, right? And I also, towards the end of my addiction, was getting so loaded on heroin and massaging that I was like starting to fall asleep, like nod out in my massages. And that's not good, right? So instead of like cutting back on the heroin, I then introduced uppers. So I would get real loaded on heroin and then smoke some meth, which I hate meth. But it would bring me back up again so I could get through stuff. And so it's this constant high, low, high, low, high, low, and trying to find that perfect common ground between taking enough downers and taking enough uppers of being able to function. During this time, like, my mom and them, like, they knew something was wrong with me, and I'm sure they assumed drugs, right? But they'd ask about it. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And just constant lies and making up excuses and coming up with weird stories of why I'd go missing for a few days and wouldn't answer their phone calls. And I'd be like, oh, I had laryngitis. I couldn't answer the phone. Like, that was one of my excuses. So you just live in this lifestyle. And I'm just going on about how I got to rehab, unless you guys have other questions.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
You're good. I have questions, but
Yeah.
just get to the point of rehab, and then I'm probably going to backtrack a little bit about like some overdoses and stuff like that.
Perfect. So all of this stuff is happening, and I'm just in the midst of all of it. And finally, one day my mom called my dad and said, like, I think that she's using drugs, and you need to come down here, and like, we need to talk. And like, they had not been in a room together since I was like 4. And we get to the room together, and I tell them, like, yeah, I'm using pills, because nobody wants to say the word heroin.
Yeah.
I never use that word. If somebody used that word, I'm like, you're a cop, for sure. But I'm like, yeah, it's pills. And so my dad was like, well, do you want to go to rehab? Well, meanwhile, like, I'd been looking up rehab for like the last year. But the thing about the drugs is that, like I said, you're a slave to it. So I would be in the middle of getting high talking about how much I hated that drug, but I couldn't stop. And I had this weird thought in my head that if I didn't try to stop, then I didn't know that I couldn't. Because my fear was I would try to stop getting high, and then I couldn't stay sober, and then this was just going to be the rest of my life.
Right.
And he said, you down to go to rehab? And I said, I am. And he put me back on his insurance right then. And the next day, I flew to California to a rehab.
Is that terrifying, or does it feel liberating, or a little of both?
A little of both. I was scared, but like, I wanted out of that relationship really bad too. And I ended up making my dad break up with him when I was in rehab. Had to make an amends for that one. But I wanted away. And I thought Moses Lake was my problem. I relapsed for about a month and a half after rehab. So there's that part of my story too. But I thought Moses Lake was the issue. And if I got out of there and I got away from the people, then like, I'm not the problem. The drugs aren't the problem. Like, this is this place. And once I get out of here, I will be good. And I was hopeful and looking forward to it, and scared as shit and getting as high as I could before I got to rehab and had to go through the detox of things. Yeah.
So backtrack a little bit. We know that now you met with your parents, you're sitting there at rehab. Have you ever had any experiences with overdoses or people getting really sick in front of you where you were concerned for them or had to call ambulances or not? What's that? Narcan?
Yeah. So
you ever had any experience with Narcan or?
Not when I was in the middle of my addiction. I now carry Narcan in my car. I always have it on me because I still know people that are out there, and like, I go to AA and all of that. So I had a couple friends die. A friend of mine, her brother was actually one of my really good friends, and he went to prison. And so I knew her because of her brother, and she was trying to get clean. And so she was like trying to kick it. And we have all these different ways to try to get yourself clean. None of them usually work. But she was taking Xanax, trying to take care of the heroin withdrawals. And there was just like issues and constant problems and stuff, and it didn't work. So then she got high on heroin as well. Well, she had the Xanax in her system, and she had heart issues, and it just killed her, you know? And in the time, it wasn't so much overdoses because I spent most of my time, again, because I thought I was better than everyone, with people who smoked it rather than people that shot up. And if you shot up, it was a secret, because you're dirty if you do that, and you're less than. And then everybody ends up shooting up. But I was a smoker, and so you're less likely to die that way. But there was all of these people getting really sick and mixing drugs and having to go to the hospital. And a lot of people killed themselves. I've had a lot of friends kill themselves.
So you think they overdosed on purpose?
Yeah. That or straight up shoot themselves in the head, or had lots of different ways of killing themselves because they were miserable. Yeah. And when you are stuck in that lifestyle and you feel like there's no way out, like you take yourself out. Mm-hmm. That was for me also because I'd been suicidal my whole life. It was an easy way out. Right. Like if things got too bad, I would just end my life. Like it was always an option for me.
Were there ever any bad drugs involved? Like fentanyl, lace, type of heroin?
So fentanyl has become, so I've been sober for 5.5 years. Fentanyl has become really prevalent in the last few years. It's been prevalent on the East Coast. I've had a little over 30 friends that I met on the East Coast because after rehab, I moved to the East Coast. Okay. Into Philadelphia, and about 30 of the people that I know from there have overdosed and died.
Clean town, Philadelphia.
Yeah. I didn't even know what it was. I was like, never been, let's go. But no, so there was terrible drugs. So fentanyl wasn't being like mass produced like it is now. It wasn't used to cut heroin like at all. We would get fentanyl patches that they have from like the doctors and scrape them off and then put them on foil and smoke them that way. But there was a lot of fake drugs, a lot of stuff that made people sick, didn't actually get you high, I was an addict in the time where they were like cutting stuff with like gasoline. And so you had to be careful because it could like eat your body. They call it like alligator heroin. And people's like skin would start to like rot from the inside. And people had like abscesses, and like my boyfriend that I was dating got a really bad abscess and almost died from the drugs. I got shingles when I was 21. Okay. You're fucking running hard when you get like an 80-year-old's disease at 21 years old. But those are the main things, especially in the town that I lived in. Like there were overdoses and things, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is today.
I mean, I don't know if I should share this, but I'll share it anyway. So I was a 911 dispatcher, and we just took a lot of calls with that. Whenever there was a bad batch of drugs, you would know it because you'd have about 10 overdoses that weekend. So that's why I asked you, is because it happens here often.
Often. The problem is, and again, that mindset of when you're in the midst of using it, we wouldn't call that a bad batch at all. If somebody's dying from something, that shit's strong. And if this guy dies or he overdoses and almost dies but doesn't die, right? Because there's a lot of overdoses without deaths. He doesn't die. I want what he had. I'm just going to use a little bit less because that's some potent shit. That's the stuff that I want.
Wow.
If it's stuff that's making people die, like, of course that's what you want. That's what we're looking. We're looking to not feel anything, to get that ultimate high constantly. So
it doesn't scare you away at all?
No, not when you're in the midst of it at all.
Dang.
I have friends now that I have a buddy from Philadelphia, and we were talking about stuff, and he's like, yeah, like I know this won't kill me. When he was in the middle of his relapse, he was like, I'll use this much. And I mean, he's overdosed quite a few times. And if he overdosed on we'll just use because we're on podcast, but a quarter size, right? So that he knows that if he goes to like a dime size of it, like it's going to be a good high and he's not going to die.
Or instead of dying, you'll just get extremely sick.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously to you now, that doesn't make any sense. They're like, if there's gasoline in it, it's not like nobody's taking gasoline, or somebody dies from drinking gasoline or something. No one is thinking, well, I'll just drink a little bit less gasoline. No, absolutely.
But that is the mindset, 100%, because that's what we chase. We chase to not feel shit.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, is there something I always wonder, because I have a way of sort of glossing over the negative parts of like particularly difficult times of my life, and sort of focusing on or really only remembering the good things. Are there elements of it that you're nostalgic about?
Not nostalgic per se. There's something that because I'm in the 12-step program, right? Somebody will be like, oh, my best day sober, or my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking. I'm like, you're a fucking liar and you didn't drink correctly. Because there were good times. There was the nostalgia, I guess, were some of the people that I met, because you're in the midst of this stuff together. And there was those times, even though we were using, we were still friends of those kinds of things. I'll have using dreams every now and then. And it's that sort of thing of those old people come back in my dreams. I always wake up freaking out, and I always in my dreams have to go admit my relapse and AA has infected my brain, but it's those people, it's those kinds of things. And some of our adventures were wild, and I loved it. I have had guns pulled on me and pointed at my head, and I'm like, you're not gonna fucking shoot, and fucking walk out, and feeling tough. And I thought I was such a badass. I cry all the time. Like, I am a big baby. But then I thought I was so strong and nobody would fuck with me. And that was like the fun part. And that was what was fun, was the lifestyle and being quote unquote untouchable. That's, again,
the power. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Confidence and relationships.
Yeah.
The heroin story.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the headline.
I like that.
Yeah.
That was really good.
I want to ask you about relationships a little bit, because it sounds like, and probably, I mean, you definitely are aware of this, that like it seems like you were attracted to people that were not great for you.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure that even by you is attributed to your relationship with your mom.
Yeah.
Right?
Trauma bonds.
So is that something you recognized at the time? That you found yourself attracted to people who were harmful for you?
Not even a little bit.
No?
If people, again, that like ego thing and just like wanting to be okay, part of what like made me get sober was I looked around and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by losers. And I was like, oh fuck, I'm a loser.
Got it.
You know what I mean? But like, I didn't realize then that I was replacing anything. It's taken like a lot of work and a lot of real like introspection and therapy and 12 steps and all of those things to realize that I wasn't doing it just because I wanted to get high. I was doing it to substitute that feeling of belonging and of having somebody that cared about me and feeling a part of, and feeling all of these things while also simultaneously not feeling any emotions, all of the bad stuff washed away. I so badly did not want to be between my fucking ears, because my brain is terrible to me, right? And at least then, especially, my brain was awful to me. It told me nasty fucking things and made me hate myself, made me want to die. But I could get high and be around all these other people that also got high, and we would just numb out the world. And you sit in a bedroom, in a dark room, and you get high together and you nod out together, and then you like kind of wake up a little bit, and then you smoke a couple more hits and we're nod out together, and just in this state of just constantly being high. Yeah.
What are you addicted to now?
Nicotine.
Okay.
And working out. And I am a complete gym douche now. Like, I have absolutely replaced that. Thankfully, like, I get to use that in like a positive way.
Sure.
But no, the nicotine, I'm like, I'm never giving this up. Like, it's the only thing I have left. But I am now probably addicted, and it sounds so dumb, but like AA and I'm not supposed to really like talk about AA, like, so 12 steps, the 12-step program that I'm in, because I constantly get to work on myself. And that became an addiction of, I am very grateful every day for where I'm at, but I'm constantly striving for more. And knowing I can always be better than I was the day before. And not like materialistic things and all of that, though those are great. You know, when you're not spending money on drugs, like, you can afford a lot more.
Yeah.
But constantly chasing being a better person and helping more people, and especially because I was saved from that life, being able to pass that on to other people, that's huge today.
Yeah. What would you say to the person who's done it just a couple times, or starting to hang out with that crowd, or, you know, they've done it, but now they're clean, but they're considering getting back on it? Like, what would be your advice as someone who's been through basically all the steps?
So I'm not as nice as a lot of people. Like, the way that I talk is just like truthful stuff. Is that so fucking stupid? We do it to like try to get outside of ourselves, right? To, you know, we just want to feel good for a little bit. But the problem is if you have done it a few times, or you've done it and gotten clean and you're going to go back, you always think like, I'll be okay. This time it'll be different. It's never different. It's always worse. So like I said, I went to rehab, got out. I was drinking occasionally and stuff. I relapsed for a month and a half on heroin, and I was just as bad in my addiction as it had taken me 5 years before that to get, because it's progressive illness. And whether you want to talk about it's an illness or whatever, people argue about it nonstop, doesn't matter. People that are addicts have a brain that wants them dead, but will settle for them using and wishing they were dead. And that illness doesn't go away. If I was to go get high right now after 5.5 years, it's not going to be like brand new. I start all over at the beginning. I mean, that first little bit, my tolerance is going to be down, but within a short amount of time, I'm going to need as much. I'm going to be doing just as shady of things. I'm going to be doing whatever it takes to get high because it's that progressive illness. So when people talk about going back, I'm like, bro, like you have spent so long getting clean because that itself is the hardest thing. Like going through the withdrawals and getting past the obsession and all of that. Like I would never want to do that again because you don't have to feel something for like temporarily, but then the drugs stop working. That's another thing about getting clean is that they work until they don't, and it's fun until it's not. And all of a sudden, when it's not working and it's not fun, that's when you can't stop, and you have to have it. And it's never not going to be that way. Especially like doesn't matter how smart you are, how great your life is. Heroin is an addictive drug, or any of these drugs. Like you become a slave to it. And I would rather not be a slave to a substance. I like waking up in the morning and being okay. Because at the end, like, that's all I wanted. When I would wake up and get high, it wasn't like I was getting loaded and all of those things melted away again and it was just perfect. I was just getting loaded so I didn't feel like shit. I just was getting loaded so I could be quote unquote normal and go about my day. Now I just get to wake up and that's how it is, 100%. And so, like, if you're going back to it, like, it's going to stop working and then you're right back to where you were at before, except you probably lost a lot more. There's more people that hate you. You've ruined more relationships, and then you have to try to rebuild it all again.
Do you find that afterwards, did I cut you off?
Go for it.
Okay. Do you find that afterwards, the people that you, or either that you cut out of your life or cut you out of their life, after you got clean, was there some understanding from them about why you were that way? From some of them, at least? From,
like, so people that cut me off or
anybody,
people that...
Either way, like anybody that you cut out of your life or they cut you out of their life.
So actually,
while you were using.
So one of my best friends, she and I just spent the weekend at her house this last weekend. She and I have been best friends since we were born, basically. We've known each other our whole lives, and that was my person. She got pregnant our senior year of high school. I was the one that took her to all of her doctor's appointments, even high on heroin. Took her to all of her doctor's appointments and listened to her daughter's heartbeat for the first time. And her daughter's going to be 10 this year, right?
Wow.
She had to stop talking to me. And that was my person and forever my person. Doesn't matter that she lives in Wenatchee, but doesn't matter how far apart we've been. Like, that's my person. And she had to cut me off because she had kids and was living life. And she knew what I was doing. Like, I was honest with her about what was going on because I've told her everything. But
did you understand that at the time?
No, not even a little bit. But she also didn't talk to me about it. It was just like all of a sudden one day it was completely cut off. And we've talked about it now. You know, that's what she had to do for her well-being. But when I got clean, she was the person that was right there.
Nice.
People I had to cut off, honestly, they either got clean or now they're dead. I had to completely leave everything behind when I got clean and stayed clean this last time. I moved to Tri-Cities. I didn't know anybody or anything here. I stopped talking to all of those people, and there's a couple that are in prison right now. There's a couple that are dead, and there's a couple that are really thriving and living awesome lives because they got clean as well. And there's people that left Moses Lake before I did, obviously, but like I swear, after I left, 3 months to a year after that, so many other people left and got clean.
Yeah. Good for them.
Is there an appreciation for living that you feel like you wouldn't have had otherwise? And maybe this is just looking for kind of a silver lining, right? But like to know that you have that in you to beat something like that,
Absolutely.
something that other people don't.
Yeah. That are dying every day.
There's two sides to it. One, I am so grateful every single day. I didn't think I'd live past 21. I did not plan on living past 21, and I got sober at 22. So every year, every day, it's a blessing. It's extra. It's bonus. When I have a birthday, it's like, wow. Oh, and I tried to kill myself. Like, I wouldn't have known all of this amazing life. Like, my life today is incredible. And I don't know how to say it other than, like, my life is better than most people I know. Like, it is so many blessings. I have it so good. Everything I could have ever wished for, prayed for, thought I would never have is my life today. And so I'm so, so grateful for that. The other part is kind of like survivor's guilt. The other part is going, why was I able to get it and they can't? So like I said, I've had a lot of friends die, a lot of friends. And at first it was really hard. Like I've written songs about it and like all of these different things. And after you lose a certain number of people, you kind of become callous to it. Mm-hmm. But I had a buddy and his name was Paul, and he was somebody I played music with in Philadelphia and was doing good. And he got his own apartment and he decided, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go get high. And he overdosed in his bathroom and he died.
It's funny you say that. I had a neighbor. He lived across the street from me when I lived in West Pasco. I can't remember his name, younger guy, probably like 28 at the time, if I think that's how old he was. Construction, and we were just friends, just neighbors. And he told me he was turning himself into rehab to get clean. Went and got clean, came back, was doing good for probably a month, and then I started noticing his old habits of having these weird girls come over and stuff. And one night I show up, and he's getting hauled out in a stretcher. And he decided to relapse. And because he relapsed, and it had been so long since he did it before, he did too much. And they found him in the bathtub, 28 years old.
Yeah. So that's a really prevalent story. When I was in Philadelphia, 3 girls died in a day and a half time frame. One of them we were supposed to take to rehab, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just going to go get one real quick." You know, like I did. I just wanted to get real high before I went because it could be the last time. You want to get super high. Dead in an alley. So there's some of that. There's some of going, like, why was I able to get it and they weren't? Why am I, like, so blessed today and have everything I could have ever wanted, and it works for me, and I get to help other people, and I have so many friends that died?
I have a challenging question for you. And I only ask you this because, like I told you earlier, my brother is a recovering heroin addict, and he's only been clean for a year. You know, and I've had him come up here. He stayed with me. He stole from me. He stole from a bunch of people. I had to kick him out. So I went through all that too. And the question I ask him, and it's a real question, is, you know, where he's at today is he works for a lumber mill. He has a girlfriend. They own a house together. They're doing wonderful. And my question is, if you lost your girlfriend, you lost your job, and you lost everything, would you be back to heroin? And that's like the one question. So I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you lost your husband, you lost your job, you lost your livelihood, do you think you're strong enough at this point where you'll never go back to the drugs? Or do you think something like a serious life event could trigger that again?
I never want to say never, right? Because as soon as people say never, like, never's happened. No, I don't think I would.
Okay.
So when I got sober and stayed sober, I had lived in Philadelphia. I came back, I went to Philadelphia after rehab. I came back to visit my dad for the summer and actually be around my brother and sister and stuff for the first time. Was close to Moses Lake because he lives in Okanagan by the Canadian border.
Okay.
I drove down. I relapsed for a month and a half. Told him, hey, Dad, I've been fucking up. He's like, yeah, I know. I thought I was, like, so sneaky.
Right.
Kicked heroin cold turkey. That sucked. Made me really appreciate not going back. At 20 days clean and sober, I rolled my car off of a mountain and I broke my back.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, we can only prescribe you opiates. And I was scared to take them. And my dad, I was like crying. I'm like, I don't want to take them. My dad's like, take them before the pain hits, you know, like, and so it scared me. 6 days after that, my best friend, first love of 13 years, I had just seen him the day after I broke my back. He came and checked on me and made sure I was okay. He got in a car accident and he died. 2 days after that, I flew back to Philadelphia because I had already planned on going back to Philly. I was just visiting for the summer. So I go back to Philly with a broken back and a broken heart, and I didn't know how to be vulnerable in front of anybody. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna end up killing myself or relapsing. Like, I need to be close to family. And that's what brought me to Tri-Cities.
Okay.
But I was given the gift of desperation. I was given the gift of, this is awful, and I don't know how to do this anymore, and I don't want to do this anymore, and I want to get better. And I learned, and I don't shove religion or anything, I'm not religious, but I don't shove God down people's throats, but I learned God reliance. So I moved to Tri-Cities, and I didn't know anyone. Wasn't on painkillers anymore. Like, I made a week and a half long prescription, last for 3 weeks, then went on muscle relaxers. I moved to a sober living home, Oxford House in Tri-Cities. And I moved here November 1st, 2016. My sobriety date is September 1st, 2016. And I remember, like, laying in bed, like November 4th, and I just wanted to text. My best friend's name was Logan. I wanted to text him, right? But I was like, he's dead, so that's not going to work. And I didn't know anybody, and I'm, like, freshly sober. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And when you don't have, like, anybody or anything, at least for me, that's where I learned that God reliance. And so even though today I have all these blessings and home and husband and all of that stuff, that is not what keeps me sober. Those things are great. Those things are awesome, like the icing on the cake. But I stayed sober when I had just a bus pass and a pack of cigarettes to my name because I wanted it bad enough. And I remember those times. And so when shit happens in my life today, especially big things, I'm like, cool, man. Like, I've been through worse.
Right.
I'm going to be okay. And I work these steps, and I rely on my higher power, and I get out of the way. So that's a big part of, like, the 12 steps is, like, handing your will over to something greater than yourself and staying out of the way. Because my best thinking, like I said, gets me loaded. Gets me going, I'm the one on acid, so I'll be the designated driver because, you know, that's me with my best thinking. Right. But when I get out of the way, I I run my own business. I have an amazing husband. I own a home. I have a brother and sister like that I wasn't allowed to see or talk to. Like my sister lived with us for 6 months. And I was on the phone with my brother today before I got here, like talk to them all the time. They're my everything. I get all of these things when I stay out of the way and let my higher power do the job. So even when things are hard, I've been through them before.
Yeah.
And so heroin doesn't solve anything. And I don't have that obsession to use anymore. That's been another thing of the 12 steps is I thought, and people that have never tried to get clean before, I thought getting clean was going to be like the feeling of not having. So like when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I need to smoke, but I don't have anything. That's what I thought like sobriety was like the feeling of the lack of, right? And at first that's what it feels like because you have this obsession and you're so used to these habits of like waking up and getting loaded and all of that stuff. But as I started to build my life and do these things, that obsession went away. And so I don't wake up thinking about it. I'll have these using dreams and I wake up and I'm like, ugh, like that was gross.
Right.
I don't think about using. Or if I have a thought like, man, I could go for a cold beer right now, like mowing the lawn. I'm like, I don't actually want that. And I'll talk to my higher power and be like, take that because that doesn't serve me.
I mean, isn't that crazy how powerful it is? It's been 5.5 years and you still have using dreams.
Oh, yeah.
That's insane.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's this weird thing too, especially when you're coming up on like a sobriety birthday. People that have like 20 years will have weird dreams like around their sobriety birthdays. It's just our brains are fucked up. They're messed up. And I don't think that they're ever going to be like cured. And I'm never going to just be able to go have a drink because, again, like I said before, I have a brain that wants me dead, but will settle for me drinking or using and wishing I was dead.
I still have dreams that I'm unprepared for a test in college.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So,
I mean,
that's some pretty powerful stuff too.
oh, yeah?
It's very hardcore.
All right, so let's just end with this. What now? So we know you're married. You own your own home. You said you're powerlifting.
Yes.
Are you competing in that? And kind of like, what's your plan for the future? What are your goals?
So I'm a competitive powerlifter. I've competed twice now. I just had surgery, so right now I'm like taking it easy, chilling out, and probably won't compete till next year. But I actually just started my own business in September. On my 5 years, I started my own business. I'm a massage therapist. Been a massage therapist throughout all of this for
What's it called?
Empowered Body Massage.
And where are you located?
I'm located behind the Tri-Cities, like Toyota. What is it called? The Toyota Center?
Yeah. Coliseum.
Yeah. 7101 Westwood Avenue. Yeah, that.
Cool.
But I started my own business in September. So I decided on my 5 years sober, I was going to go out on my own. Well, I decided before that, but I decided that was going to be my opening date. I was going to go out on my own, and I have been so booked. Like immediately when I started, like the word of mouth has been amazing.
That's awesome.
And like right now it's March 30th and I don't have any openings till May.
Wow.
I have been super blessed. So building on that, my husband, like I said, I'm married. He's also in recovery. So he goes AA as well, does his own program. He's a union pipe fitter. So he's finishing out his apprenticeship. And then we might end up going on the road and renting our house out. And, we're never having kids because they're like, not my thing.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the fear of getting out of that cycle that you had from your mom.
Really easy to break it if you just don't have kids.
Yeah.
Also, I've never had that motherly instinct. And I know some of it's like life stuff and all of that. But like after getting sober, I got diagnosed like bipolar and ADHD. And so I've got the mental health stuff and the depression and all of those things. And my sister got it too. So it's like definitely genetic. I don't have to pass that on. And I just never wanted kids. I'm selfish. I like, if I have a long day and I have a headache and I want to go home and take a nap, I can.
It's so beautiful you recognize that, though, because there's so many people out there that are selfish having children and not recognizing that they shouldn't.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that it's totally okay to like, I understand both sides. So like now, I mean, I'll admit it. There are times where like I get really annoyed that I can't just leave.
Yeah.
I've got 2 kids, right? So I'll get annoyed, not directly with them, but with the circumstance that I have where I'm like, I can't just go on a trip if I want to. I just can't do it. And it doesn't matter what I do. My kids are going to be awake at 7 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter what happened. So now I wouldn't trade, that for them. Right. But, I think that's brilliant to be able to recognize that you just don't want that. I can see both sides.
It really helps that my husband does not like children. He's like, ugh, grossed out by them. Doesn't like them.
Well, that's
and
good,
so
though.
it worked out really well. But no, so like our future is just continuing to build. And, you know, like again, all of these things that I just never thought would come to fruition. And so every day it's something new, and I get to help other people, and I get to be successful in my business, and I get to be a gym douche who, you know, is a competitive power lifter. And it's another thing, like growing up in a household where I was told like that I was fat and ugly and all of that, like powerlifting makes you feel real good about yourself. Number one, I get to eat basically whatever I want. I have to eat all the time because I'm lifting heavy. And I've completely like changed my mindset from my childhood, and I'm so grateful for that. But no, the future just holds more of this. Like there have just been things that happen that I never would have guessed, and I just keep the door open, you know?
I love it. Yeah. That's awesome.
No, I love it.
You got anything?
No, man. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yeah, this is
Appreciate
awesome.
Yeah.
it. Pretty simple.